Diary, it's the beginning of August 2021, and today we're going to look at the systems features and design points for the QNAP TS-673 in our household. Now, it's a bit of a shock to me, but I've not documented our setup of the QNAP NAS as to why I chose it and how it works for us. So that's the purpose of this video. So first, I just want to document the network setting of our QNAP NAS. So we've got a QNAP NAS. I think there's going to be two diagrams in this thrilling video. So we've got the QNAP TS-673. Now this is a 6-bay NAS, of which I've got 5 drives in a RAID array, and I've also got one drive for systems. But more importantly, this is the networking side of things. We've got network A, which is for insecure household. We've got network B, which is more secure, which is for devices like televisions and anything sort of internet related that wants to get data from this NAS. So it's kind of, it's not insecure, but it's not totally secure. We've got kind of medium secure. Well, I say it's trusted. Medium equals trusted. And we've got C, which has got workstation, which is 10 GBE. This is 1 Gbps. This is 1 Gbps. So let's look at, so to talk about the networking, we've got the NAS box itself. We've got a PCIe card, which has got a 10 gigabit port, and that 10 gigabit port goes to a 10 gigabits. Let's draw it. Goes to a 10 gigabit switch. So we've got switch 10 GBE, and we've got workstation. That's master workstation. So how does this work? So the idea is that everyone gets the speed that the maximum speed that they can have, and they're all separated from each other. So there's three principal networks here. There's actually a fourth backup network, but I'm not going to explain that. We've got the insecure DMZ network, which is shared with the smart home. We've got the trusted network, which onto which are streamed music and video, such as sits on this box, not very much, but there's some. And we've got the main data channel, which is from my master workstation, which goes over a 10 gigabit switch using copper networking to a copper 10 GB card here. So, and these two devices, by the way, are over 10 meters away from each other. So it's quite a long bit of copper, but it's copper. So that's the networking, and via the firewall and other mechanisms, so you can, in the QNAP operating system, you can say what services are on each of these adapters. So we don't allow, for example, this is the insecure network, we don't allow logins from there. In fact, logins are only allowed from the workstation network and from this network, and there are also two-factor authentications. In general, two-factor authentication is kind of irritating because you get your user ID and password and then you have to use a secondary device. Obviously, that's what two-factor authentication means. But it means to say you have to run an authenticator program on typically your smartphone to give that third bit of information. So I'm afraid all these things are necessary in our sort of scummy world where people want to crash or break or compromise your systems. But we try to split the network so the system is maximum secure and has maximum performance for the workstation master. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is storage and caching. So this is again where I think it's this is just really systems design more than anything. You'll see in the previous video the features of the 673, and you're going to see now how we've designed to actually use those features to give us maximum performance. So, sort of same diagram again. Here's Mr. TS-673. I think I could have drawn that bigger, couldn't I? Anyway, here we go. We've got 5 bays here. And this is just my logical separation. They're just 6 bays in the actual NAS, 1 bay. So this is an SSD. And when the machine was first installed, I took care to only install the machine with just a single SSD. So you install the operating system and the sort of systems partition, and that sits on this single SSD in this drive. Now I would have liked to have 2 SSDs in a RAID, simple RAID configuration, but there aren't enough slots, as you'll see in a minute. By the way, QNAP. This is the QNAP TS-673. There's also a TS-873. So if I'd had more money and more space in the cupboard, I could have used an 873, which has 8 bays. The 673 has got 6 bays. But price was important to me, so I've managed to squeeze the system into 6 bays. So when the system was installed, it was installed with the SSD here. So the system volume is on the SSD. Meanwhile, I'm then populating these drive bays here with 2.5-inch spinning disks times 5 times 4. Actually, they're 5. No, sorry, I do apologise. They're 5 terabytes. So in the disk world, in my previous NAS, I was using 3.5-inch drives, and they are pretty heavy. By what I mean by that is, we used to when, for example, we would leave the country, which we quite often, we'd move this NAS around. So we'd put it in a safe, and hunking this NAS around became a bit of a problem. It's been the case for many years in enterprise environments that people use 2.5-inch drives quite frequently. So I wanted to make the jump from 3.5-inch drives to 2.5-inch drives. But guess what? For years, the storage limit of 2.5-inch drives has been, in practical terms, 5 terabytes. And again, I've had this NAS for 1.5 years now. It's still 5 terabytes. I have no idea why certain manufacturers haven't got themselves gripped to have bigger storage capacities, but that's the way that it is. So we have 5 terabytes times 5 in a RAID array. Okay, so that whittles down to something less than 20 terabytes, and that's what the storage is going to be used from. But I want to show you next about caching. So we've got a hierarchy on this NAS because it's maximally configured. So what have we actually got? We've actually got 64 gigabytes of RAM. The next thing we've got is we've got 2 M2 SATA disks, and each disk is 2 terabytes. Now, unfortunately, the way that QNAP works is that you can't use these drives independently from each other. You have to have them RAIDed if you want to be able to use it simply. So actually, I've got 2 terabyte M2 drives here, but they're only going to give me 2 terabytes of storage. And then I've got this RAID volume here, which is, let's call it 20 terabytes of 2.5-inch disk. So we already explained how we've got the maximum speed for workstation backups. So my workstation's got a large amount of disk storage, and that needs to be backed up securely and quickly to a NAS. Again, the NAS, as has always been the case for our devices, is only a secondary storage. So to me, it makes absolutely no sense to have a workstation. So that's off camera. To me, what I don't want to do is have the workstation here with not much storage, and via the 10 gigabit LAN, use the disk here as my primary storage. That's what most people do, but to be honest, I think it's complete nonsense. The speed you're going to get from your local disks on your local workstation, especially with M2 drives and PCIe, which is what is here, is over 2,000 megabytes per second. And you'll never get that across the 10 gigabit LAN. Obviously, the 10 gigabit LAN will give you a maximum of 1,000 megabytes per second, but in practice, we've found we get significantly slower speeds than that. So this NAS box is a secondary storage device. It's a repository for backups, it's a repository for ad hoc backups, it's for emergencies, and this box receives all the backups of all our systems and securely saves them. So in this hierarchy, if you can imagine any backup coming into the system, we've set up a cached set of pools. So for example, I've got a backup of my main system, so let's call it J system. My partner has got a time machine Apple backup. Now, because I think my backups are much more important than hers, her backups will go directly to disk. So via her 1 gigabit network, she has a 1 GBE entry point, and that will go directly to her time machine. It won't go to this, and it will go through the RAM, obviously, but it won't use this SATA disk. Whereas my storage pool and my storage area here, so I've got one for code, which is something like, I think it's about 6 terabytes. And that goes through the memory and the SATA disk and the physical disk. So I back up from my workstation. So my workstation goes via 10 GBE LAN. It enters the machine, and I'm assuming the QNAP software is reasonably intelligent. It'll be cached first in the RAM. When that cache is exceeded, it will go to the SATA drives. These M2 SATA drives, obviously they're maximum rated at 500 megabytes per second, and they will store 2 terabytes. When that's full, it will actually go to a spindle. Now, the point about all this caching is that on a normal daily basis, I work on a large website, for example, where we may change, I don't know, maybe 200 megabytes, a gigabyte, absolutely maximum in a day. So it should be possible when I do that ad hoc incremental backup from my workstation to just satisfy everything into this cache. And there are various ways of setting up the emptying of this cache. So you can say to the QNAP that on a schedule, this is being emptied, let's say, once every day. Or you can set it to automatic, whereby the system chooses when it finds a quiet period of this NAS's operation and pushes down the data from this cache onto physical disk. So mine was set to schedule, but then because I went for some days and periods of time when the NAS is switched off to save energy and wear and tear on the NAS, I now set it to automatic. So that's how the storage works. We've got the operating system stored on an SSD. Some media files are stored here as well. The main bulk of storage is on this RAIDed array, but the RAIDed array is front-ended by a 2 terabyte area of M2 SATA drive and a 64 gigabyte RAM area. And the idea is really that hopefully the majority of backups that are done on a daily basis will hit these 2 cached areas. So they'll go at the maximum speed possible, which for the 10 GB LAN is 1,000 megabytes per second, a gigabyte per second. It never gets anywhere near that, I would say. And for a wired backup, we're down to 1 gigabit, which is 100 megabytes per second. Okay, that's the sort of systems design. I hope that really helps you understand why the 673 is such a brilliant product, because it does have the 10 gigabit LAN via the PCI PCIe card. It does have the large RAM capacity, which is 4 sticks of 16 gigabytes. It's got this 2 terabyte SATA area, and it's also got, in my case, 5 bays, which I've chosen to fill with a slightly lower capacity than usual, but lighter and quieter and cooler 2.5-inch drives. Okay, Dari, I hope that's a good explanation of how things work, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.